Hey guys, Coach Logan here, reviewing our game of the week from the online tournaments. The game I chose for this week was played between Bhavya and Simone, two very strong up-and-coming young girls, and I thought this game was interesting both for the effectiveness of the attack carried out in it and some of the opening questions that came up. So let's take a look. So Bhavya's playing white here. She played d4. Black played knight f6, natural move, controlling the e4 square, developing a piece. It's flexible. We see bishop f4 from white, which I would hesitate almost to call this a sideline. It's the London, which is maybe like a, I don't know, it's kind of like a 1.5 line. It's somewhere between a main line, but played much more commonly than a typical sideline, like, I don't know, something way lower on the list. It's a good opening. The main line here would be to play c4 and just grab the center, but bishop f4 is a very credible alternative. So bishop f4, and here Simone played g6, which is fine. And now after the move knight c3, this is where we get the first time I have a disagreement with how black played. She played the move bishop g7 here, which feels very natural. It's continuing black's plan, based on her last couple of moves of knight f6, fianchettoing the bishop, castling, But I think when white plays knight c3 in concert with pawn to d4, it's very important to play the move d5 here. And the reason why is because if white's given another move, then she's going to play pawn to e4. She'll put this pawn here and just grab control of the center and I think be solidly more comfortable. By playing d5, then you shut down the e4 square and you ask a very serious question to white. Okay, well then what's the point of your knight here? Okay, if it's not supporting e4, then it's just blocking your c-pawn, so you can't do a typical kind of queen's pawn idea. And, it's hard to get e4 and I'll just take your pawn. So for instance, let's say white were to play as she does in the game. We're going to see this type of plan in the game, but basically queen to d2, bishop g7, and bishop h6, this sort of Yugoslav or English attack type of idea. Black can just castle, and after h4, this is white's typical plan. Get rid of this bishop and throw Harry the h-pawn and just open up the h-file and try to give checkmate. I think the problem is black is now castled, reasonably well developed, and very stable in the center, and can just start looking to break open the center, which is the best way to meet an attack on the flank, is to rip open the center. For instance here, she's threatening to take on d4. If the queen has to recapture, then knight to c6 comes with tempo. If white were to play something like d takes c5, then the pawn runs through to d4, and white's knight is kicked somewhere useless. So this could get bad for white. I think white should play something like bishop takes g7 and then defend their center. But now black would be in time to play a move, c takes, and then h5, which really puts, kind of squashes white's intentions on the king side here. I think this would be a very comfortable position for black to play. Maybe not better than, I think it's still probably even-ish, but I think black has at least as good attacking chances as white. White's king is currently in the center. The king side is compromised with the pawn on h4. And if she goes queen side, then the c-file is semi-open, and I think black is fine here. So big point is when white plays knight to c3, I think it is important then specifically to play d5. Now, in the game, after knight c3, black went bishop g7, and e4 was allowed. Okay, we're basically in a perk defense now after d6, but I mean, this seems pretty good for white. I don't know. Maybe I just don't have the highest opinion of this opening as from the black side. It can be tricky, but some people who are experts in it can make it work. But I like the white side. I like my center. I like space. I don't know. Queen to d2. Knight b to d7, we get castles from Bhavya, castles from Simone, and now she continues with this plan. Bishop h6. She plays bishop e2 first, which personally I would just go bishop h6 directly, but it's fine. We get now from black c6, and I want to come back to this. I think that it's very important now for black. White's attack is coming. White is looking to play bishop h6, as we've seen, and then throw the h-pawn and rip open the file and deliver checkmate. However, it's black's turn to move. Black is castled, black is developed. I think, therefore, it is very, very, very important to now start to look to rip open the center. If you can rip open the center as black here, then it's much harder for white to just sneak up the side of the board. So I'm really a big fan of the move c5 here. I think that needed to be played. Now if white were to continue with something like h4, we can take in the center, and then actually white's in a little bit of a hot spot because they can't really retake the pawn. If they take the pawn, they stumble into a tactic. Pause your videos if you want to try to solve it, but it's not really a tactics video here, so I'm going to continue, but keep your video paused if you want to try to solve it. Black actually has two choices. They could play the simple pawn to e5, which just forks the queen and the bishop, or the move knight to g4 here, which might even be stronger. It's unleashing this discovered attack on the queen, and the queen can't go to e3, so there's no way to defend this pawn on f2, and the knight will just take it, and it's much better for black. So yeah, so I think it was actually pretty important to get c5 in here. Instead, we got the move c6, which, again, it's typical in some lines of the part, but this is starting to feel slow to me. We get h4 from Bhavya. Queen c7 now from Simone. Again, this just really feels too slow. I think here black needs to start something. b5 maybe. Could at least threaten to kick this knight, and then this pawn would be hanging. So maybe white would have to play a3, but then black could play a5 and hope to get in b4 and create counterplay against white's king. I still probably like white here, but I think this was necessary for black to make this a game, or to keep this a game. Queen c7 just feels very, very slow, and now I think Bhavya's attack is really ready to go. She goes h5, not wasting any time. We get e5 from black, which is looking to open the center, but it's not going to be too successful in doing that. Just d takes e5. Black recaptures with the knight. With the pawn. And okay, we've opened the d file, but that hasn't really opened too many lines for black. Their bishop is still buried in on g7. You know, even if they get a rook to the d file, it's not super useful. And white's attack just continues. Bishop h6. Whenever black fianchettos pawns like this, their king safety is compromised if this bishop on g7 goes missing, because there's going to be a lot of holes on the dark squares. So bishop h6 makes a lot of sense. We get knight to c5 from black, attacking the pawn on e4. And Bhavya just takes the bishop, takes the pawn to open the h file. Now this is what I'm talking about. With the bishop gone, the queen just invades on h6 with check. King to g8. Bhavya decides to get another piece out, which is a decision I like. I'm a big fan when you're attacking of using every piece in the attack. I think sometimes kids get the sense that they're attacking and they feel this immediate pressure to just go for an aggressive check or something like that, but really you need enough like oomph in your attack to make it work, and that's why I like the move knight f3 here. That knight is potentially coming to squares like g5. It's connecting the rooks back here, just a good move. And after knight takes e4, Bhavya finds a combination to win the game. So pause your videos if you would like to try to solve the position here. Okay, keep it paused if you want more time, but it's just this forcing sequence. Knight takes e4, getting rid of the knight, and decoying the black knight from c5. So now this diagonal is even weaker. Nothing can really come to block it. So now we just get bishop c4 check. It's a very annoying check on black's king. There's just not really a good way to get out of it. In the game, what was played was king h8, which gets mated on the following move with queen takes f8, but really there's not really too much that can be done here. Rook f7 is not really a great solution. You know, white could just take the rook with check, but also has the option to play queen takes h7, which is even stronger. This is pinned, and yeah, this is clearly not going to end well for black. Okay, so a really nice win from Bhavya, pretty clean win, just a solid game against a very strong player. This was a good example of like this sort of attack working with you know, throwing Harry down the board and just ripping open lines on the king. And for anybody who plays this structure as black, again, if white plays knight to c3, I think it is very, very important to play the move d5 here to stop e4, in which case I think that black should be fine. All right, anyway, so this was Coach Logan, and I will be back here next week reviewing next week's game of the week. All right, bye guys.